So you can look there as well. So finally, it is my pleasure to bring you the incomparable Trudy Goodman. Trudy is the founder of the very influential LA-based meditation center, Insight LA. She's also the founder of the Institute for Mindfulness and Psychotherapy. Did I get that name right, Trudy? I think I did.
No, it's meditation and psychotherapy.
Meditation and psychotherapy, excuse me. I'm sorry. My understanding is that that is the first organization to officially work on sort of bridging those two disciplines of contemplative practice and psychotherapy. So something of a pioneering organization. Trudy was also the fourth ever teacher of MBSR, teaching directly alongside John Kabat-Zinn. Trudy is a wonderful meditation teacher whom I have studied with myself and gotten enormous benefit from studying with. She has been meditating for over 40 years in both the Theravadan and Zen traditions. I have never heard Trudy make a big fuss about this, but she has very deep, very extensive retreat experience. She is quite an accomplished practitioner. We are very, very lucky to have her with us, sharing what she's learned. She has done retreat and extensive practice in the Thai forest tradition, in the Burmese traditions, and in the Zen tradition. So she has interesting insights into what you might call comparative Dharma or comparative contemplative practice might be a fruitful area of inquiry. So here's how we're going to ask questions. What I think you should just do is raise your hand. Just raise your physical flesh and blood hand, and I will call on you, and then you can ask Trudy your question. We encourage mainly, ask her about whatever you like, though we do encourage practice-oriented questions in this group. And if you are for any reason uncomfortable asking the question yourself, you can send me a chat. And I will ask, you can privately chat to me and I will ask the question for you to Trudy. Now, before we get started, Trudy, is there anything you would like to say to kick things off?
Yeah, only just what I said at the beginning. I'm really happy to be here and to sit with all of you. Is this pretty much your group, John? How many people do you usually have?
Honestly, it varies.
Sure, of course.
So it's, I'd say there are roughly maybe like somewhere between, I don't know, there's okay. About 100 people maybe that we see once in a while, and then a couple of dozen that we see pretty frequently.
Great. Yeah, I'm just happy to be here and to answer any questions, but also I'm interested if there's something from your own experience that you would like to share. That's also very welcome. We say Q&A, but I really like Q&R, which is questions and reflections, because I don't see myself as, the guru who has the answers to all the questions. I really see us as exploring the questions together and practicing together. And I know, yeah, sure, I've been practicing for decades, but honestly, it's not something to brag about. I just happen to be old and have done this all my life and most of my adult life. And I really feel very much like you, a practitioner who's just always learning. So yeah, in that spirit, I want to invite you to have any dialogue or anything you'd like to bring up. And you could really ask me anything. I'll take responsibility for deciding if I want to answer.
Excellent. All right, so let's see those hands, people. Does anyone have a question or reflection for Trudy Goodman? I think I saw Mary Hill's hand first, beating out the usually reliable first questioner. So go ahead, Mary.
Hey, Trudy, great to meet you.
Hi,
I'm Mary. I'm a TMI teacher and facilitator and practitioner. And my question is this, and it's actually happening to another person I meditate or I facilitate. Sometimes, though, when, it all turns into total body with the breath and maybe heading somewhere, okay, sometimes I get this sensation in my neck that feels like a tightening. And when it happened today, because of your instruction, I decided to adjust my head a little bit, and it helped. And this practitioner is doing the same thing. He sits up and he's adjusting his head, but he's also making it the object. So I thought it was kind of fascinating that we're both dealing with this same area. And I just wondered if you've ever run into anyone whose neck particularly feels, it's not like scary or uncomfortable. It's just some kind of contraction in the front of the neck. And I just wondered if you ever run into that.
Well, honestly, Mary, not specifically in the neck, but to have, I mean, you're an experienced meditator, so you know that to have areas of tightness or areas, of different phenomena taking place is completely just a sign of practice. I don't have specific experience with the neck. And you said that it happened because of the instruction I gave. And
No,
I was
it
curious
didn't.
about that.
It didn't happen because of the instruction you gave. Because of the instruction you gave, I remembered to just adjust my neck, even though I'm lying down instead of sitting up, just to adjust my neck a little bit. I found it to be useful. And anyway, it was just some kind of weird synchronicity that this guy that I facilitate is having the same thing. And we're just working around it. So anyway, thanks a lot for the instruction. And thanks for listening.
I have a question for you. I have a question for you though, Mary. Are you talking about sensations that are actually painful?
They're not so painful that they can't be tolerated. That's the reason I do my stationary meditation lying down.
Have you ever just let I'm guessing you just let the contraction happen. You don't try to stop it or adjust your neck or make it loosen or anything like that. Is that correct?
No. Today I tried adjusting my neck and it went away for a little while, and then it just got bigger again. So I usually just make it the object, and I get curious about it, and I see where it goes and how it changes and that sort of thing. But anyway, I feel like I've taken up enough time, and it's really wonderful to meet you.
Thank you. I'm glad to meet you too. I'm just going to add that sometimes, that letting it get bigger and all the things that you're doing, sometimes also people have a memory or dream or something else that comes up in relation to that part of the body. And yes, it's unusual that you and a companion or a friend are having that same phenomenon, because sometimes it is sort of a body memory of something. And it may appear, it may not, but as long as it's not too painful, I'm glad for that. I'm just glad for that.
Yeah, now my suspicion is it is a body memory, but I'm waiting for it to declare itself. And in the meantime, it's not frightening anymore. It was at first. So thank you very much.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Thank you, Trudy. Bijan, was that hand still active? All right, cool. Go for it.
Yes, thank you, Trudy, for doing this. I have another practice question, more about, so often so my background is more with TMI, 2 years of that, and I was more at the stage of, I guess, in the whole thing, stage 4, where I was trying to get out of both distractions or mind wandering specifically, and I switched actually to doing metta in the past few months just because I felt that was much more what I needed. But the question I have is actually, so in TMI they talk a lot about how to deal with mind wandering, of like, we'll first look for the aha moment, and then just checking in and bringing attention back to the meditation object. What I found over the past few weeks is actually a difficulty with obsession instead of mind wandering, which I feel is like the opposite, where it's almost like a constrictive attention on something that I don't want to be the meditative object. The only other time I've had sort of a similar thing is maybe with pain or like a very itchy bite. And then oftentimes the advice is like, well, make that your meditation object and then you'll see it like lessen or go away.
Sure.
When it's a thought though, like an obsessive thought or a negative thought, it doesn't seem that it's a different kind of feeling. Like making it a meditation object or like concentrating more on it actually creates like worse feelings in a sense. So I figured like, well, I'll try to apply the same techniques that you would usually use for mind wandering on that. Like, oh, I'm obsessing, like, aha, come back to the breath. And then if it goes back to the obsessive thing, then like come back. I wonder if you had, if that's maybe the correct thing to do, sort of treat an obsession like a mind wandering event, or if there's different techniques to dealing with an obsessive.
Yeah, I mean, you can always treat it as a mind-wandering event, but generally, if it's an obsession, if it's really something that's just repetitive and looping and round, and like a sexual fantasy or something like that that just won't let go, it's often not enough to just say the mind is wandering. I mean, you can just do it over and over and over, and eventually it will change thanks to the laws of impermanence. But you can also try something that I found when something like is coming back like that over and over and over, there's usually some emotion that is fueling that process. So if you can drop underneath the content of the obsession and feel feel in the body, like what is the feeling, the emotion that may be under this, because so often when that emotion is allowed, when it's recognized and when it's allowed to be felt, then there can be some ease. Have you tried this? You're nodding, so I feel like you tried it.
I can tell you it's about the election, right? So just just the sort of the anxiety about a lot of feelings there. And so yes, sometimes it does. Often when I try to like drop into it, I guess I find myself trying to replace it with kind of like, well, I'll still have my loved ones. Like I'll still be able to love, like I'll still be able to care for people that matter. Like, and that's more like maybe trying to bring an antidote to the feeling rather maybe than experiencing the feeling directly. And that's usually what I've been doing. So I'm wondering if maybe instead, rather than trying to cancel the feeling, which is extreme anxiety, with something like, oh, well, I'll like maybe not consolation prizes, but just sort of like antidote, maybe just like actually just feel it very strongly, that kind of anxiety. There's a fear to feeling the fear, I guess, as well.
I think the fear of the fear, the fear of the anxiety is the problem because, like you said, yeah, the antidotes are comforting and it's a kind of metta or self-compassion to self-soothe in that way. But from a meditation point of view, it'd be much more interesting to just feel that raw feeling. I think it was Robert Reich who said today, I feel nauseously optimistic about the outcome of the election. And there's a lot there. We're all feeling, I feel deep sort of global shame that so many millions and millions and millions of people voted for a president whom I consider to be racist, nationalist, and not good for our country. Now, if those words offend you, those are just my personal opinion, and I'm happy to actually understand where other people are at, because that's one of the things that's going to have to happen, is that we stop seeing our political opponents as our enemies, and but all of this fear and anxiety, it's such a rich area, unpleasant perhaps, but rich area for exploration, Bijan. So if you have the courage and the ability to do that. You're a meditator, you can do this. So just, I love when people answer their own questions, which you just did. So just experiment. The main thing is to experiment and explore and not feel bound by instructions or things you read, because making the practice work for you and making the practice your own is what will actually keep you engaged for your whole life.
Thank you. It answers my question and so much more too. Thank you very much for that advice.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bijan. Thank you, Trudy. Do we have other questions? Andrew, nice to see you, by the way. Welcome back.
Good to see you. Hi, Trudy. Thanks for being here, and thanks for making
Hi.
Inside LA. I live in LA, so I've benefited from it a lot directly. And so, thank you.
Thank
My
you.
question is it's such a basic question. I feel weird asking it. So, what I'm noticing happen in my practice is I'm trying to, feel the breath, feel the body, whatever the case may be, and I'm noticing two things happening, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't know how to move forward with it and make progress. And what I'm noticing is either I'm not feeling anything, like I'm trying to like feel the breath, and it ends up being almost like detached observation of the breath, but I don't actually like feel it. It's just like it's not like I'm looking at it from a distance almost. And then the other thing I'm noticing happen is I'm trying to take a sort of a posture of like a relaxed curiosity towards the breath, for example, but I'm noticing that what's happening is my mind is like grabbing onto everything. It's almost like I can't, I'm having trouble noticing and feeling the breath without my mind grabbing it and controlling it. And I'm curious if you have any guidance there, because I'm not sure what to do about it.
First of all, I really love basic questions because I don't know that we ever really get past the basics. They're always so important. And I want to ask you a couple questions. Like when you say you find that you're observing the breath like from sort of a great distance and you don't really
Mm-hmm.
feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because the breath has gotten difficult to feel? Like maybe it's gotten very subtle or very light and it's just hard to sense the actual feeling of it. Is that what's happening?
Sometimes. Yes,
Because when
sometimes the breath is very like shallow almost.
well, it can be very imperceptible too. I mean, yeah, maybe shallow is a description. Sometimes I think shallow is more like rapid, shallow breathing, but that's not what you mean. You mean it's just not, you don't feel the whole movement of it in your body. But to
Yeah.
me, that's actually a sign of practice. That means that to me, it's a sign of being settled in your meditation and having some concentration happening where the breath actually does become lighter and harder to perceive in that way. And then from a Vipassana perspective, like then what happens is, yes, all these other appearances start to grab the attention. And that's where we practice something called in choiceless awareness or in Zen, shikantaza, where you're just sitting and you see what is arising, whatever is predominant in the attention in that moment. And you're really letting it arise and pass away, come and go, appear and disappear without trying to make it go away or make it be peaceful or make it be empty or whatever else you might be wanting in your practice. And then to see what is it you're wanting? Why isn't this moment enough? Why isn't this good? That's so interesting always to notice, like what isn't satisfying about this experience? What is it that I want more, better, different, less, whatever that might be. As for then grabbing onto the breath, that's where the practice of stepping back, which comes from the 13th century Zen master Dogen Zenji, and he taught that when the attention goes towards things, which is usually what's happening. We're looking out our eyes. Like right now, I'm looking out the window as the light begins to fade. It's probably already dark where you are. I'm looking out the window and I can almost feel the sensation of my eyes moving out towards the trees and leaves that are outside the window. So you're reversing that. Basically, Dogen said, when you approach experience like that, that's delusion, because that's the self wanting to own the experience and wanting to capture it, and like you're describing with the breath. But when you step back and allow the myriad, all the phenomena, all the appearances to just appear and come toward you, he said, that's awakening. That's awakening, because then you're not trying to make anything happen. But whatever does appear in consciousness in that way is the truth of that moment. And it's kaleidoscopic, it's going to change moment. It's going to morph into something else. So when you're grabbing onto the breath like that, probably your body is also tipping forward a teeny bit. And you might just try that stepping back and seeing what happens if you treat the breath more like a guest. It's just a guest in your life coming like that. And, like you're sitting on the beach and watching the waves of the ocean, and nobody has the idea that they're going to control the waves. Might try to surf them, but you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that brings up anything that resonates for you.
No, it gives me a kind of a good shape around it. I guess the thing for me to practice is that letting go, right? Because my mind wants to, as soon as I start to pay attention to the breath, it's like my mind wants to start controlling the breath, as opposed to the beach analogy of just feeling or watching the waves. It's like my mind is trying to, because I know I can control the breath, like I can change
Sure.
it. My mind wants to do that. And so I guess it's just practicing that, letting go, leaning back.
Well, it's one of the things we can control, but in this life. But also, I don't know about you, but for me, the expression letting be has always been more helpful than letting go. When I hear letting go, I feel like, oh God, I'm supposed to let go. And maybe I can, maybe I can't, maybe I don't even want to. But letting things be just feels more peaceful. So you could try that on too.
I'll try that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew.
Maggie.
Thank you, Trudy. Yeah, Maggie, please. I'm pretty superfluous to this whole process, actually. I wanted to take the burden off you of having to.
I mean,
you got it.
It's a small group, so I can see everybody. Yeah.
True enough.
Thank you. Thank
All
you,
right,
Judy.
Maggie.
I had a question about, I guess, like lifestyles in meditation. I'm just wondering if you could speak to whether you think it's important or it has been important to you to have a partner who also is into mindfulness or meditation, and whether, like, what importance do you think that's had for you?
It's a great question. I've gone through periods of my life, long periods, where I've been practicing just as a single person, not living with anybody else, practicing with me. In fact, even as a single mom. And then I've been married to somebody who doesn't practice. I've been married to somebody who does practice. And now I'm married to somebody who, I've been married 3 times, Maggie, so I really can answer this question quite thoroughly if you're interested. So I'll just say that having a partner who meditates is, what's nice about it is they understand what you're up to, and they aren't going to necessarily feel personally hurt or abandoned if you go on a retreat or you take time alone, that they'll understand. And if they do have those feelings, they'll work with those feelings. So that's a really nice part. And also sometimes you can sit together, which is also a very intimate and lovely thing to do. However, having a partner who meditates is no guarantee that it's going to help your practice, because it just depends on the quality of relationship you have. I was married to somebody who had the title Zen Master. We were together for 15 years. We did tons of intensive practice together, retreats, and wound up teaching together. And in spite of all of that practice experience, our marriage went down in flames, and very fiery flames too. So there is no guarantee. It's so easy to wish that the partner you have was also your spiritual soulmate, and if they would only meditate, and it would be so great. I mean, I certainly had those thoughts, but it's just not necessarily true. Sometimes it's better to just have a nice, understanding person who isn't, who respects your practice, but maybe isn't that interested. And especially if you have kids, you look young, but everybody looks young to me now that I'm old. If you have kids, it's actually really useful to have a partner who isn't also wanting to go on retreats. So you can think of it that way. But I'm curious, Maggie, where's that question coming from?
I'm new, and I date John, who is a more serious practitioner. So, you know, it is just kind of coming from, I'm interested, but I'm new. So kind of wondering if you had that experience of somebody being really into it and somebody being more like casual.
Yes, yes, I have. And I also want to say that it's also like if you're just new in a relationship and you're falling in love with somebody, it's really easy to think that maybe if you meditate, they'll love you more, or something like that, to do it for that reason. And maybe he will. I don't know John that well or in that way. But it really needs to be something that you enjoy, not just something that John enjoys you doing. So if you're new, just see what you enjoy, what kinds of meditation you enjoy. You actually might wind up a meditator, but it might not be the same kind that John is. There's big gender differences too in who's drawn to what kind of practice. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, everyone. No, that was wonderful. Thank you, Trudy. Thanks, Mags. Any other questions? Also, I couldn't possibly love you anymore, meditator or no matter what degree of meditation. So, sorry, I got distracted by my professing my love. Does anyone have a question? Was there a hand? Ian.
Ian.
Can you just go in a little bit more? You mentioned right at the end there differences of genders of what meditations they tend to get into. I was curious if you wanted to get a little bit more into that.
I know, I said that, and then I thought, what do I actually mean by that? But
you can take it back if you want.
No, I think, okay, so for example, Bijan was saying he's been practicing loving kindness and doing metta practice. Before Sharon Salzberg wrote her book on loving kindness, and I think it came out in 1995. Before then, metta was like this. It was like this little side thing that we did at the end of a meditation. We'd offer some phrases, kind of like dedicating the merit of a practice, but nobody practiced intensive metta meditation. But after she and Joseph studied with the Burmese meditation teacher U Pandita and learned intensive metta practice, Sharon really put it front and center. And metta is more relational practice. I think the self-compassion practices, the loving kindness practices, they tend to be more relational practices, the Brahma Vihara practices. And I see them as really important, along with the more, what would you call it? Just mindfulness, vipassana, just the awareness practices. And for me, I actually found that Ram Dass, who is a gay man, embodied kind of both, and he would talk about loving awareness. And that was really helpful to me, sort of unifying the two. But I think I want to take back the generalization and just ask you where the question's coming from in your practice, Ian.
Well, I mean, you brought it up, and I was curious. But I was reading your bio.
It's my fault.
And I saw that you started with Carol Gilligan, and I hadn't thought about that name in quite a while in Ethics of Care. So it's just been on my mind.
So maybe it's the difference between Jean Piaget, who I also studied with, and Carol Gilligan, a developmental psychologist who was all Piaget, you're all too, most of you, not even born long enough ago to know who that was. So thank you, Mary. He's a developmental psychologist who studied how children's minds, how they perceive things, and how their minds unfold and develop, because he was interested in intelligence and how we know things. Epistemology, it's called, the science of how we know things. And I went and studied with him because I hadn't met the Dharma, I hadn't ever heard of it, and I was interested, like in perception and how do we know things and consciousness, which was not his interest actually at all. But his interest was just much more cerebral and much more in observing, whereas Carol Gilligan was, she was really interested in gender differences and also in how to support girls and women in having a voice, which, remember, this is over 50 years ago. When did In a Different Voice come out? What, 50 years ago anyway?
Yeah.
And even though people lament the prejudices that still exist, in the caste system, of course, being white, I'm on top, but being a woman definitely knocks me down a peg, even though we may regret the imbalances and unfairness that still absolutely exist. We have come a long way. I will say that from when I was young. Yeah. And the thing is, Ian, in the deepest sense, when you're meditating, there's no male, there's no female. It's those categories and identities, they absolutely fall away. And though when they fall away, it's such a liberating release and relief. And the difficulty is when that zone of, empty of identity, empty of categories, free from being fixated in anything like that, when that zone gets imposed on practitioners and they get told that whether they're male or female doesn't matter, it's like saying to a person of color, I don't see color. Well, that annihilates your life experience when someone says that to you, because you don't have the privilege to not see color. So I just want to add that caveat that, yeah. Oh my God, there's Mirabai. Hi, honey.
Hello. I'm in bed because I fell on the ice yesterday.
Oh, was that when you hurt your hand? You sprained your hand, you said.
Yes. What is this? November. We had ice. I fell and now I'm recovering. So,
good.
But I want to see you. So I'm here.
I'm so happy to see you, honey.
For everybody.
Twice in 2 days, I got to see Mirabai. What a treat.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yeah. Mirabai, do you have any questions?
No, I'm just delighted you're doing this.
Okay.
Any other questions? So I'll call on William in a second. And then Sean, I just want to briefly say, thanks for coming, Mirabai. Nice to see you. For anyone who doesn't know, this is the also incomparable Mirabai Bush. Like Trudy, a real pioneer of meditation in the West, a wonderful teacher, a SitHeads alumna. She came and did Q&A with us as well. I hope she'll come and do it again with us sometime. Right now, she's just chilling with us in the audience, which is great.
Were you there, Mirabai, when I talked about Sharon and her bringing metta and mindfulness and relational practice, being a pioneer and bringing that forward? Yeah, I just mentioned that because we were talking about some gender differences. Yeah. So William.
Hi, Trudy. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
My pleasure.
I guess I'm just wondering, sort of in your opinion, with the sort of deep retreat, with some of the more systematic practices that you might learn there, the maybe proper ways of practicing Vipassana and going through several different meditation practices in the body or with feeling or with the mind. It seems that in our sort of the American meditation culture, we have things like Headspace and Calm, and we also have the medical sort of approaches to meditation. I'm wondering what you feel like the sort of next step for programming or types of organizations would be in the United States. Do you see a gap in, the needs of sort of a Western audience who wants to maybe go a little bit deeper into meditation? in not necessarily a clinical sense, but in a more, I don't know, spiritual, sort of meaningful life exploration sort of sense. Do you feel like there's a gap, or what do you think the next steps are, I guess?
I think right now the next steps really have to do with changing the face of Buddhism in the West, at least in North America, and including more voices and practitioners and teachers of BIPOC, teachers of color, teachers, more diverse voices. And so that's, I think, a huge movement that is just being born and really needs to happen. And it sort of mirrors, of course, the racial unrest and injustice in the rest of the country. White people started these things, we just did. And it's very hard to retrofit a white organization because white people are just astonishingly clueless about what it's like to live in a different kind of body. And that can be really harmful and painful. So one big movement that I see happening is this movement toward greater diversity and genuine inclusiveness, not just including, oh yeah, you can come join us, please do, but being sensitive to the cultural differences that might make it more or less comfortable for that person to come join and might affect their experiences of belonging and do they actually belong. So that's one area. In terms of deep practice, it's a little tricky now because a lot of the retreat centers are closed because of COVID.
Sure.
So the hybrid, which is these online retreats that people do at home, it's a great thing. And I think that will actually be a movement more in the future too, because people are being forced to figure out a way to do formal practice while integrating it into their actual, everyday place where they live. And it's not an easy thing to do. So that I think the pandemic is going to change some of those ways of practice. I'm sure there are still places where you can find, go into solo retreat and do deep practice and be mentored to do that. I feel like for me, it's been invaluable. So I'm biased in favor of that. It's been invaluable, and I've had the privilege really of being able, as you said, to practice in some different contexts, including a Dzogchen retreat in the eastern mountain jungles of Bhutan, where the practices were so different. And yet for me, it was so joyful to see, oh, the teachings of the Buddha are here. We're just shooting blue hungs at reality and making it full of holes like Swiss cheese. And that's how we're going to understand emptiness. Or do you know what? Just these very different. That's something I loved. I wanted to create a Nalanda University for me in the 20th and 21st centuries, because that was a place where in the 11th century, well, maybe it was the 12th century, 1100s, people from the the traditions are very siloed in Asia still now, but in those days they came together in that place, and that fascinated me. I also just found this old interview that was in the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies magazine, the Insight Journal, that Musang did with me in 2004, where I talked about the differences in the practices that I had done. And you know what, I'll send that link to John, because because I was also talking about psychotherapy, you especially might be interested in reading it. It's just fun. It's a lot, it was how many years ago, but it's still, I still feel that way. So.
Right. We have that unique position now, with in the information age where in the United States, I think especially, or, in the West, so to speak, that we get to practice all of these different types of meditation. We get access to all these different teachers. I think for a lot of practitioners, it's a bit overwhelming. What do I practice? Because I could practice anything. And you have all of these systems, which if you were to enter any of them, you can go pretty deep. But I think a lot of sort of people who are entering the practice, they have just a bounty of things to choose from. And it's not the sort of access, but the how do we arrange it in a way that is bit by bit, step by step, a little bit systematic. Yeah, I guess.
I think you have to immerse yourself in one tradition. I really do. I
Yeah,
just don't think you can do a little of this and a little of that. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, when I mean, I sit at the beach a lot. If you go to the beach and you want to find water, you know, you can dig down in the sand until you get to wet sand and then there'll be some water. But, you know, if you dig a little over here and then there's none and then a little over here and then there's none, you aren't going to find that water. So I
right.
really feel like at some point you have to commit and dig that hole. And it doesn't mean you're committed for the rest of your days, but,
Sure.
you know, one Zen teacher used to say, well, you just really need to do this for 15 years and then you can go off and
Right.
do other things.
Right.
But to have that kind of perspective, like,
Sure.
I think it's important, especially with, like you're saying, this bounty that, you know, we didn't have, which was probably in some ways a blessing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to
Yeah.
just have to limit our field of activity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, William. Thanks, Trudy. So we had someone asking if they can ask a question. I just want to be mindful of time. I know that you have to go at past. So would you be okay with one more question if we deliberately keep it quite short, or would you rather call it now?
Well, according to my math is so bad. What is 5:22? Okay, we have 8 minutes according to my clock. How about you?
Yeah. No, that's right. I just wanted to make sure that that was okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. So
Fine.
Sun.
Hello everyone. My name is Sun. But you can really call me whatever Sun means in your language. I love learning more about my name. I had a question for you, Trudy. Thank you for joining us today. I was watching, I don't know if it was live, but it was an interview / Q&A with the creator of Midnight Gospel. And I was
Yeah.
really, yeah, it was so fun to hear that little Q&A. And I was really struck by his openness about psychedelics and encouraging others to kind of be open about it, destigmatize it, bring it back into the conversation. So I just being open about it. I have tried experimenting with microdosing and meditation. And that's where I really learned about, I don't call them honestly, I've only ever called them psychedelics on this call. I call them my plant ancestors. I
Okay.
believe that they do store knowledge, and that they can pass it on to us, if we're open to it. But when it comes to meditation, like I just wonder, because they weren't always named, like they were just plants in the past. Like, what if they were used and integrated with meditation practices? I just have no idea where to even look to find that information. I know that yeah.
I was going to say it's hard to find that information because they're illegal. So but we have had evenings at Insight LA to explore this question of meditation and psychedelics. Last year and the year before, we had 2 evenings dedicated to that exploration. And I bet, I know they were recorded and I bet you could find them, Son, and I think it'd be interesting for you to hear them. But I mean, I just would say, there are many people I know in the Inside LA community who are experimenting with different plant medicines and merging that with their practice. Spring Washam has led retreats to Peru, where they use the medicines and do lots and lots of meditation. So they're actually they are retreats that actually join those 2 paths of self-discovery. And so there are people who are experimenting and exploring, and that it's not hidden. And I don't know if you have more questions about this.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just, where can I learn more? I mean, I feel like we should restore the right for people to experiment with their health instead of having outside forces do that. And I feel like this is a part of it for me. And it's just
Well, I know
frustrating
that
not finding information.
in Oregon, they just legalized the use of psilocybin for therapeutic uses. which is a huge step. It doesn't help the researchers because the federal laws are still, dominate that. But it's actually, I think, kind of a scandal that for the last 40 years we haven't been able to really research these substances and learn more about them, because I do feel they hold huge potential, especially for people with terminal diagnoses who are facing death, and the terror that may come with that. Anyway, in lots of ways. And I know for me and lots of the people of my generation, it was really, it was our experience with entheogens that drew us, helped us into the practice. It wasn't that so much for me, but I will say it was definitely helpful to me. For me, and I want to tell you this because this is a difference, this is a gender difference. My first huge spiritual opening happened before I ever heard of Dharma or anything, and it was while I was giving birth. So that's a very female experience that that happened. So in terms of finding more information, Roland Griffiths at Johns Hopkins has been doing lots of studies, and like I said, you could find those talks if you write to somebody at Inside LA, and I mean and Spring Washam, you can look her up, WASHAM. There are definitely people who are interested in this. And Duncan, I love Duncan. He's a dear, dear friend. And I loved being in Midnight Gospel. Probably the most fun thing I did that year. And I don't go so far as to recommend them to people, because I have also witnessed people have, terrible experiences.
Yeah,
And drugs are something that can be very dangerous. So I don't recommend it, but I certainly appreciate it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't not recommend it. I just recommend really caution and care and responsibility.
Definitely.
Respect for it, yeah, because it's powerful. Thank you for asking that question. Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay.
And also, I think Ram Dass talked about it too. I mean, you can read Ram Dass's books right nearby.
Absolutely.
I think Ram Dass, I think he wrote about it. Yeah.
Well, Be Here Now is the
Yeah.
original, merging of psychedelic and contemplative practices. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one that was our kind of Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look at this, 1 minute to go.
Perfect. Thank you, Trudy. I just want to read from the chat really quick. Someone noted that the Buddhist Geeks podcast did a series of interviews or a series of episodes on this specific topic.
That's great.
So you might look into that.
Oh, and I did one with Vince Horn on this topic. I can't remember what it was called. I think something about perfection. I don't know, but you could just look up. I did an interview with Vince on this exact topic too.
Awesome. All right, so that would also be on Buddhist Geeks, which is Vince Horn's podcast for anyone who's looking for it. Well, this was fantastic. Thank you so much, Trudy. I should have called this out earlier. Trudy was in the amazing Netflix series Midnight Gospel, which is super fun. We loved the whole season. It was great. Trudy was great. Duncan's great.
Episode four. It's the best.
Episode 4. You get like a real ass-kicking Trudy Goodman. It's great. So I'm gonna put the Donna link once more in the chat so that it's right at the bottom for anyone. I know Trudy has to go. This was so wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insights. I think I speak for everyone when I say this was very, very valuable. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for your practice.
Thanks, John.